have to introduce this week's podcast guest. We got two more people on deck tonight. So we got Aliens. Aliens, how you doing? Say hello.
What's going on, everybody?
All right, we got Proto Dad. Proto.
Hey, how's it going?
D joining us for the first time. D, say hello.
How you doing, guys?
All right, good to have everybody. And our guest today is David Sirlin. Sirlin, very happy to have him on the stream. Creator of the Fantasy Strike universe. Sirlin, say hello. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. Hello to everyone.
All right. That's what I want to hear. All right, so we got a couple of very mixed bags of topics this week, specifically regarding fighting games. We've had kind of this very long discussion here on the podcast about fighting games moving to online formats, and I wanted to bring in somebody who would really have familiarity in making a game that supports online scenes, right? Because one of the things that happens with a lot of games that you see online is that they don't have an adequate experience to provide tournaments or to provide a consistent multiplayer experience. So it's interesting to talk about games that in my opinion, right, have worked to accommodate that, and in what ways can we accommodate those kinds of experience. But first, David, I want to thank you for coming onto the show, and we'll just start by really getting into the topic of discussion here on the show, which is fighting game design for online play. Right now, a lot of communities are moving to online formats. They've been doing tournaments, they've been doing exhibitions, they've been doing lobbies, just all kinds of things, right? To mix success, right? We've got situations where the players are region locking their tournaments, region locking their lobbies, so that they're able to play at a even playable level, right? Because sometimes we just have, games that run 5+ frame delay and it's completely unplayable. But my question is this: I want to open with a question. One of the things that I've noticed in talking to developers of different fighting games, right? One of the things that Digital Ken's Ken Wei told me a little bit back when I talked to him on stream, and this was echoed by Enway Games when I talked to them about Power Rangers, was that they thought that shipping with rollback netcode or a quality online experience was necessary to be competitive for their titles. Do you think that's true for new fighting games, or even just for Fantasy Strike in particular?
I thought that was going to be a really easy question to answer, but you threw me for a little loop by saying competitive, because now I don't know what that means.
Competitive in the sense of like attracting players to buy the game.
Right. Well, let me just give you two answers and you can pick which one you like the most. I think it's the absolute most important thing for a fighting game, and that it would be an embarrassment to make a fighting game without it. You should just not bother making it. We designed Fantasy Strike from day one, ground up entirely around that idea. So the first answer would be, of course you have to. Are you kidding me? But the second answer, do you need it to be competitive? That actually depends on the market and not on, principles or what's good or bad. Like, apparently you don't. Games.
Right. Games are still shipping, because it's difficult, right? Because the first thing you would say is, well, games are still shipping without it. So why, why am I asking that question? But I guess
the answer is that the metrics that people use for what they buy aren't really what's good. Unfortunately, a thing that's really popular amongst players is marketing.
That's true.
Yeah,
like a game, they're not going to say like, oh, I really love this game because of its marketing, but they know about it because of its marketing. It got a lot of sales because of its marketing, and so it has a big player base, and they only want to play something that has a big player base, and so that can totally overwhelm any concept of quality. But if you want to talk about quality, yes, absolutely, you need rollback netcode.
Okay. And I know that Fantasy Strike in particular probably leans on this heavily. I kind of want to get your opinion on it. Online tournaments. Do you think that like the online scene needs to be quality for a game to grow its scene? Like, do we need that? Do you even have to have multiplayer online for the game to be successful necessarily?
I think you do need it. Yeah, and I was going to say in today's world, but that's a little confusing because I meant in pre-COVID-19 today's world.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think you need it there, and then that post, like, of course you need it. Yeah, like it should be as good as possible. And just to help the discussion along, I think there's just two really different kinds of things you should be thinking about. One has to do with the technical side. So when you connect with your opponent, like how smooth is it? You brought up several of those issues before about what's the delay like are the rollbacks just overwhelming? Just the technical quality really needs to be there, or else the whole thing is pointless. And then a separate concept that totally separate is the user interface to deal with online stuff in general. Like how do you find opponents? How do you match with them? Like are there lobbies? Like Fantasy Strike doesn't even have lobbies on purpose.
I'm gonna ask you about
so
that.
It's all that UI stuff, and on both of those issues, like we put so much effort into it, and I think the result is that Fantasy Strike is really literally the leader in the entire fighting game genre. Like I know that sounds controversial, but I think when you break it down feature by feature, it's actually pretty hard to compete with us. And if you did push back on that, we would just end up as like one of the cutting edge top tiers, amongst a couple others. So yeah, ask me about. I don't know if you care which side you care more about.
I care a little more about. I mean, I think the technical side is clear, right? Like, there's a game that has rollback netcode, and then there's a game that doesn't. And unfortunately, there's been like cases like Street Fighter V that had issues with it. There's been cases of like Battle for the Grid having issues with their lobby system. But specifically,
there's a big spectrum though. It's not just on off with rollback. They're like within, like you need rollback, but then within that, there's quite a variation in quality of implementation, it seems.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned that this is actually interesting. You mentioned that Fantasy Strike doesn't have a lobby system on purpose. Why is that? You guys seem like you'd be able to do it any time.
Oh yeah, it's by design. It's got nothing to do with what we can do. It's on purpose. So the more before you just like pause on the lobby system, but imagine that we had like a casual matchmaking queue and a ranked queue and 10 other queues. So like let's say we had 12 queues. Not a great idea. That's 12 different buckets of matchmaking you're putting everyone into, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that, like, if I don't think that would be controversial. I don't need to sell you on like why we don't have 12 queues or something. So you're like, yeah, you should have as few as possible, right? So we have casual and ranked. If a game wanted to have like 3, that would, like, casual ranked and some extra weird one, that would be fine too. But you wouldn't want to add too many more because you don't want separate buckets. So what a lobby system does is gives you a much worse situation than if you had 12 queues. I mean, a lobby system just sucks all the life out of quick match.
That's true.
In many fighting games I've played, it becomes just the obvious de facto situation that you shouldn't use the queue. I mean, are you kidding me? Who uses that? Like, we all sit around in our private lobbies.
Go to US East or whatever.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah, so like it just sucks everyone out of the main queue, and I think you want to maximize it, not minimize it.
Okay.
So Blizzard is real conscious of that. Hearthstone, for example, doesn't have lobbies either, and they have a lot more players than we do, but they're still conscious of that. That was a conscious design decision of like, let's have the main way to play the game to be the matchmaking queue so that it's as full as possible. And so, like in Fantasy Strike, we have a kind of a low community, but we do stats on matchmaking, and we still have less than 90-second wait for a match when you take the average across even all the dead times. That includes all the worst times when the fewest people are online. So when you probably are going to play, it's way faster, like just a few seconds. And we're able to do that because we've completely gone all in on making that queue, pop.
That's really interesting, right? Because the exact opposite approach has been taken with a lot of fighting game releases lately.
So I should mention though about 1v1, because like you can't literally have just these 2 queues and nothing else. That doesn't, like, you need a way to challenge someone. You need a way to to play another person. Like, you can't even run a tournament if you can't do that. So you have to have that. But the way I think of that is like, okay, think about it. If I wanted to call you on the phone, as an analogy to if I wanted to play you a game of Fantasy Strike or Street Fighter or whatever game,
right?
So if I wanted to call you on the phone, what would I do? Would I start by creating a phone lobby and then then setting the number of slots in the phone lobby and setting the parameters of this lobby, and then like messaging you outside of the phone call, some kind of code, some kind of room code or something to get you to join. Like what an incredible, crazy. No one would think to do that. Like you just call the person.
Right.
Yeah,
Just
direct
call them on the
connect.
phone, direct connection.
But
Yeah,
that's
direct connect.
not what you do in any other fighting game I've ever played. Like maybe there is one that's analogous to the phone call, but I can't name it. And so that's why we did that in Fantasy Strike. In Fantasy Strike, inside the game, inside our user interface that looks, consistent, you have a friends list, which is cross-platform. Doesn't matter what platform the person is on when they're on your friends list. You can click on anybody and you challenge them. That's it. It's like the phone call. And when they accept, the result of that is the same as if they were in the same room sitting next to you and you were in the local versus mode.
Right.
So you just challenge, you click one time to challenge, they accept, and then you're basically just playing local versus with them.
That's
from
true.
a UI
Now,
perspective.
That I believe is amazing. Yeah, the first time I personally tried it out, and I think that's really cool that it is literally, as you say, it's sort of like you went into their house, you plugged in your controller, and now they're navigating the main menu. They go into the versus mode. Y'all pick 1-on-1, 3-on-3, whatever, and now y'all are it's like stream regular game.
Right. So like in the if you were in the same room, you could play 1 versus 1, or we have this team battle thing with 3-on-3. It's the same thing online. It's the same menu. You pick which mode you want, and then you pick your characters. Another very important factor is somebody out there is going to say, yeah, but I want to be able to watch it. So if we had lobbies, then I could have extra people to watch. But I think we have a better implementation of that too with spectating. I don't know if you guys have tried it, but
yeah, of course.
Yes.
I mentioned that you can click on somebody's name and then you can challenge them, but you can also click on somebody's name and watch them, or you can also invite someone to watch. Like if you were about to start streaming, I could invite you to watch. But anyway, you do this one-click watch thing, and then the spectator, they don't have to wait for the next game to start as you do in some games. So they'll start spectating the game that's going on right now, and then they will automatically just keep spectating forever. So if you were spectating me and I played Bob, you'd watch that game, and then I get in the queue again and play Alice, and you'd watch that game. And even if I switched between ranked mode or casual mode or played all sorts of different people, no actions would be necessary on your part. You would spectate all of my online games forever until I quit or you quit. It's very handy for tournaments.
Yeah,
you just have the people running the tournament who are streaming it or whatever.
Right.
Spectate.
right.
Getting to tournaments. So a lot of people are doing online tournaments now. Do you think that? And one of the things that happened, well, just to preface, there's been this discussion for some reason that most games can't be played online in tournament setting, in a competitive tournament environment. Mostly because those games just don't have adequate ways to do it unless you're within a few blocks of each other, and even then it might not even be good. But I kind of know the answer that you're going to give me, but I want to put it on the record because I really think this really shines in terms of Fantasy Strike. Do you guys have to worry about where people are from when you guys run tournaments? Like with a really solid online base, do you think that player region even matters, really?
Yeah, so this is back to the technical question, right?
Right.
We're going between. So the answer to that hinges just entirely on, is the quality of the connection good enough to really support competitive play? So overall, this is why I say we're either the best or top, or at least top tier. I can't relate to those complaints in Fantasy Strike because I regularly play people on other continents. Literally, I play I have a friend in Japan who I play from California. It's fine. I've played someone in South America, I know there, and another person somewhere in Europe who I play somewhat regularly, and it's it's fine. It's a lot better than when I play those very same people in other fighting games.
Yeah, for sure.
So the point is that the technical implementation, it can vary a lot. So someone's complaint that like it's not really feasible, it might be correct in some games and not correct in others.
other games.
So
Yeah,
for
put
our
yourself in
game,
the
we
situation.
don't
like,
region lock actually.
No,
we don't.
there's no region lock
no.
at all.
Well, the only thing we do is that even if the connections were of course nothing's perfect, but I mean, even if they were like magically always perfect, we still need at different time zones. Like, people in a certain part in the world just don't want a tournament and
at that
a certain time of day.
Yeah, there's a million reasons to make your own tournament, right? Like, so specifically for your friends or your time zone.
So we do things like, okay, this tournament is for Europeans and it's at a time that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
And this tournament's for North Americas, but it's not actually restricted though. It's just like to help them out.
Yeah, just to
really
make things easier,
make things a little more convenient.
Right.
But yeah, because you have to put yourself. Yeah, if you're awake, you can play. It's put yourself in the situation of like a tournament organizer. It's like, all right, my local is closed right now, so I need to put a tournament on. But the problem is that I'm in the middle of I'm in Oakland, California, like WNF, right? For example, they have to think about it and say, well, we need to make sure that everybody around here is from the local area because we need a certain amount of ping for the game to be reasonably playable. And on top of that, we need to be able to stream it, so the matches have to go smooth. And they have to think about all these factors. But in a game with the right implementation, we don't necessarily have to think about any of these things. We can say, okay, well, this time if we're going to put it at this time because it works for me, the streamer. I'm going to put it at this time because it works for the competitors that I know are going to be participating. And if anyone else wants to sign up, that's on them, right? That's kind of the world we need to be living in. And I guess the question is, do you think that specifically in what you've seen, like when when a game has a good online community, do you think it impacts the overall interest in offline? Do you think people just don't want to play it offline for any reason?
Yeah, that's tough. That's like an empirical question. You have to look at a bunch of cases to see what happened. Like from many years ago, when Dead or Alive was included at Evo, when I used to help run Evo, so at that point I was involved in it, and Dead or Alive was kind of cutting edge with online stuff, and we wanted to give them a chance, and they really didn't turn out. they didn't show up, So, but that's like one example. That shouldn't doom every online game forever or something. Yeah. So I really don't know how to answer that.
Okay. I just, there's a lot of like theory going around about, does an online tournament work? Can we do majors? The big discussion was online major. Can we do it? Especially.
So it depends on the game.
It depends on the game.
Yeah. Let me give you an example. I played Street Fighter 30th edition. I played it for several weeks. I was actually number 1 for weeks on the leaderboards. So I know a lot about it, and I'd like to just describe to you what the online play is like. If the connection to the opponent is really good, then the experience feels pretty good. If the connection is like a little bit like still good, but not perfect, they're not like in the next city to me, the experience feels slightly worse, but still good. But then if it gets a little worse than that, there's some kind of cliff it hits where it just gets crazy, and it's so bad. I'm going to tell you how bad, and you're going to think I'm exaggerating. I probably should have taken video of this. Like, really, I don't think you're going to. I honestly don't think you're going to believe me, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try.
Right,
okay.
I'll take your word.
Here's how bad it was. Often, this is not just when it's a terrible connection. This is like average. Okay, it would start to pause constantly, like play pause, like just stuttering like that, all the time, and then all the sound effects turning on and off. So it's like a cacophony to listen to, and you're playing in like. I say slow motion, but slow motion would be way better because slow motion is smooth.
Yeah, it's
this is like this. Yeah, this is stop start, and I'd play people in this horrible connection. And I think like I know all about this old game. I played it for 20 years. I can't imagine trying to learn the game. Like,
oh my lord, yeah.
Like, because I'm using
that's
like tricks I know work, but how are they supposed to deal with it? In this
it's a different meta, man. It's a way different meta. Like you're talking about all that, I'm like, oh man, that's
fundamentally.
I play Smash Brothers competitively, and you know, with nothing to go on but net play, I'm like, that sounds like every day of my life.
It's
oh my goodness.
So if we were playing that game, I would say. I would say we could do it online if everybody was pretty close and the connections were good. And if the connections started being even barely iffy, no, it's like you really can't even allow that. And it's too crazy. But that's terrible net play. That is like that's not what you're going to find in several other fights. It's not like only Fantasy Strike has solved that one. There's many
there's a fleet
that are there's a whole fleet of them that are much better than that.
Yeah. Support your game with the rollback netcode. Trust me, I'm a dad. I don't get out a whole lot. So any game with good netcode, I greatly appreciate. So thank you for all that you do. Just on that front. Like I actually did have a question. You know, kind of going from the online realm to the offline realm. Fantasy Strike's always kind of intrigued me because it is one of those easier to pick up fighting games. I think I saw an interview where you were talking about it's kind of that midway gap between dive kick and then something like Third Strike. Just an example. What inspired you to get into to approach the game with that sort of design in mind?
Yeah, so great question. Now, I'd like to clarify something about that because it's so just almost universally misunderstood. And you didn't say anything wrong there. That's fine.
Okay, yeah.
But there is a possible confusion in there. So what you're referring to is that if you look at the complexity of a fighting game and how many mechanics are layered on top of it, the simplest you could really ever get is dive kick. That's a game that has no joystick and has 2 buttons. It's a game that when I heard about it, I thought sounded stupid and didn't care at all. Just thought it was a joke, had no interest in it. Then later I tried it and I was blown away. I gotta say, it's way better than I imagined.
It's a lot of fun.
There's way more to it than I didn't think you could even have there be that much gameplay with 2 buttons. So it was a real eye opener to me. So that's the compliment. And then the negative, and I don't mean to hate on dive kick, it's great, but the negative is, even though it achieved way more than I thought it could, it still wasn't quite enough for me. Like I'm looking, I don't feel like I have a bias towards one end of the spectrum or not. So Guilty Gear, is coming out today or whatever in closed beta. Guilty Gear is like one of, if not my very favorite games of all time, and it's the opposite end of the spectrum. It's super complicated.
Oh yeah.
But I'm not saying I only want to play a super complicated game. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's just something kind of missing for me in dive kick. I wanted more. I don't need Guilty Gear more. If you give me Guilty Gear more, I'll like it. But anyway. It was this big curiosity to me. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, like the Guilty Gear end, there's so many choices that I felt like the whole genre was just this glut of extreme complexity. And that a game like Street Fighter 2, which is one of my favorite of all times, and I worked on, I was lead designer of a version of Street Fighter 2.
Yes.
So I really, really like that point on the complexity curve. I like it a lot. Again, not exclusively because I like Guilty Gear 2, but I just felt like the genre had just dropped the ball, and there wasn't anything like Street Fighter 2 is old. What's new? What is coming out now that is around Street Fighter 2? And when we were making Fantasy Strike, the answer to me was nothing. Like we were the only people even aiming at that target.
What was coming out around the time you guys were doing Fantasy Strike? Like Street Fighter 5? I can't quite put me in that time frame.
I think it was a little bit earlier than that.
Well, we could look up the dates, but we were working on it it's been over 4.5 years. So we started working on it more than 4.5 years ago.
Okay.
But let me tell you about the misnomer, because that whole story I just told you, that's about complexity, but it's not really about strategy. We are actually not aiming to be strategically anywhere on that spectrum, but less than Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or whatever. As far as like a strategy game for experts, we're aiming at the very top end, and people don't seem to get that. Now you could say like, oh well, I think you failed or something.
I think people don't get that until they play.
I would disagree with that, but
Yeah.
the point is the misnomer or the misinterpretation is that where we're even trying to be, and it like what we're aiming for is a game that's really difficult for experts to play in tournaments, and that's what it feels like. That's what our game feels like to me all the time, in that I play a couple games of it and I need like a break, almost like a StarCraft thing. Not quite like StarCraft. That's even more draining. But the point is that when you have a game that doesn't have long combos, that requires constant like returning back to neutral, and constant correct decisions, like so many rapid fire correct decisions, it's actually like really difficult to play well.
It's very mentally draining.
It's mentally draining, but I would also use the word engaging, because that's one of the things I like about Killer Instinct so much. I've been playing so much Killer Instincts on my channel at least recently, because I think that it's an engaging game. It's something that I don't want to take a mental break, guys. That's not fun. Watching the screen is not interesting to me. The thing about, and you mentioned it from the start, Sirlin, marketing sells great, right? Because when you show a bull shot of like a super that lasts like 15 seconds, you're like, wow, I really want to play that game. And then you put 100 hours into it, like, wow, I really don't want to see that super come out this time. And that's what ends up happening, right? So a game that's like constantly engaging is, I think, maybe, you mentioned, there's reasons to be tired of it. Like you play and you're like, oh, and that's actually something somebody told me about KI the other day. Was talking to one of my friends and we played a bunch of KI and like, oh man, I need a break from this game. It's so intense. And I'm like, you know what? I want to keep playing it. It's so much fun. I can play all the time. I don't have to sit there and watch you play the game. I want to play too. So I just break your combo and we're done. Let's go. And it's a very interesting actual like balance to hit, like the amount of complexity that you mentioned. And especially in a consistent online environment too, right? Because you're talking about more actions that have to take place more back and forth, and you need to provide it in a stable environment.
Yeah. Something for your audience to think about this whole like bundling up of or conflating of complexity and depth is that don't do that. They've got very little, if anything, to do with each other. It's actually been easier for us to make sure that Fantasy Strike is deep by not having combos be difficult, because everybody testing it is playing it for real. Everybody's doing the max damage. That's not a thing. Like people aren't. Like basically we get imagine if we're balancing Guilty Gear. Now they do fine, but they think how hard it is for them. Like who's gonna someone plays it and gives some feedback. Well, do you trust them? Are they any good? You can't really trust anybody except for the handful of people that can do all the physical difficult things to even really play the game. But we have a much wider group of people that are, well, everybody really is capable of doing all of the physical things. So we can tune the depth part. And I think what depth really is in any kind of fighting game, it actually just is tuning in a sense. And then you might think, oh, what is it really? Is that, I thought that depth is like layering on all these, different systems. But when you layer on a bunch of different systems, that can be good, but you're adding more and more chance that it's degenerate, more and more chance that like, oh, nothing matters except for a very narrow way to play. And the way you defeat that, if you had a game with 1 million systems and it did turn out super shallow, well, that's because some of them are too good. You need to tune it, right? So that's what depth is. It's tuning so that it doesn't become degenerate, so that there are rapid fire real decisions all the time. So that's it. It's my point here. It's just a completely different concept than complexity. So we are trying to be on the simple end of complexity, but that doesn't say anything about the depth we're shooting for.
It's because you got people who come in. I hear all the time, I'm scared to pick up a fighting game because of all this crazy stuff you've got to do.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Fantasy Strike, stuff like Fantasy Strike, Pocket Rumble, Power Rangers, Battle for the Grid. Those are all great examples of the accessibility being there as far as the technical accessibility, where you don't have to worry about quarter circles or anything like that, and even for people who are transitioning from a game like Smash to a more traditional fighter, Fantasy Strike with a jump button is also really great for transitional stuff. But then you're also maintaining that depth of the mental engagement, like Shiv said, when you're going into a match with another human being, and stuff like that to me is super exciting.
On
I love that stuff.
On the point of the crap. Like on the on the on the point of the like the death part and accessibility that sort of stems from the complexity and all that. I think it also helps people in kind of even more specific goals. Like I have played fighters for quite a long time. I can do the most, I can do so on and so forth, but like there are lots of styles that I would never tend towards, or things that I would even try to do because of things like certain levels of complexity. Like I remember I never touched grapplers until I played Rookie in Fantasy Strike.
I actually was about to say the same thing.
Yeah, like so this is the first time I even had to address that mentality, and because of how the game is set up, it allows me to kind of skip to the meat of, and I'm actually learning what I'm supposed to do. You're understanding kind of the situations that you're actually meant to deal with at a high level. And even if you're playing some sort of like super top level player, I think one time I played it on stream and I ended up running a set with like a top 5 player or something like that, and I won 0 rounds, but I also could understand why I was not winning a single round.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. Is that exact comment we get quite a bit, actually, and specifically about grapplers. That the comment that like, oh, I didn't know I could even play grapplers. Is that grapplers are generally pretty difficult to play in fighting games, and I think there's like 2 layers of difficulty. The first is just execution. A bunch of people are just like, oh, I just can't even do it. Like to play this character, it's all about landing its 360 motion under a really like a high pressure situation where it has to be frame perfect or else they can just get out. And like I play other characters and I get like a little better and I do a little better and I get a little better and I do a little better. But with a grappler, I'm just garbage until I can perfectly do the tick throw like 360. Like if I can't do it perfectly, I have no chance. So
you're not playing the same character at all.
Right. So the first layer is like, maybe I would want to play a grappler, but it's so unsatisfying because of like the curve I just described of like, getting better versus doing better is really rough on grapplers. And then the second layer is that I think to this day, I think that grappler players, like real grapple players, have something different in their brain going on than everybody else.
No, that's fair. That's a fair statement.
Yeah, the story of the grappler player is like they're so oppressed. Their life is just miserable like all the time, and they just never give up. And they have like this endless optimism that there's some way they can thread that needle and get their shot and get in and make it happen. So there's just like a certain type of person that can just weather that storm and do it. And the point is that on the first part, the execution part, you already lost a bunch of people. But in Fantasy Strike, when you don't have that part, we still have the second part. You still like if you play Rook, you got a rough life.
Yeah, I learned
but there's a bunch of people that are like, actually, this is pretty cool. I never even tried, but like I never took it seriously. I didn't know I was a grappler player.
Right?
Yeah, that's funny.
But and specifically in regards to losing players, because this is something that comes up a lot, right? People are like, oh, you should, you bring up with anyone, play a fighting game. Oh, online's not good, so you lost me there. Or oh, the game is too hard, so you lost me there. Right. And you mentioned play style matters, right? Because teaching someone how to play Zangief is like, don't even try it. But
yeah,
like, but even before that, let's talk about before the character select screen. do you think that the presentation of the interface and overall, like, the amount of hand holding you do on the player really matters? Like, is there a way that a game can sell itself? Because we don't have a track modes anymore for arcade game, like for our games. Some do, but you usually don't need them. Usually you either buy the game or you don't. You don't get demos these days. But when you build an interface or you build like an online experience, are there like choices that you have to make specifically so that new players can understand it and like be welcomed?
I mean, we've done everything we can on that. Except a different question is like, is it effective? Right.
Okay,
So,
yeah, is it effective, right? Do you think that these decisions are worth making necessarily?
I mean, I wish we had a lot more sales. So what can I say? Like we've tried as hard as we possibly can, and did those decisions get us more players? I kind of don't think so. We're just full of features that players say they want, but are they supporting Fantasy Strike? You know, I don't know. I also think of what the Tekken guy Harada would say, that they don't even have a tutorial because their stats showed that like nobody played the tutorial, so they didn't bother making it. But the way I think of the issue you're bringing up is like, I think you don't need to do those things, but it's sure nice if you do. So,
Right.
Like we didn't do it for the need. It's just more like it just felt like craftsmanship, you know.
Like what
we
you
we
wanted
should
to do, what you felt is right
yeah
to put in the product
yeah
at the time you were making
yeah
it.
exactly. So
Right.
here's just some examples. I had never seen this in a fighting game before, but to label the characters on screen, which are Rushdown and Grappler and Zoner. I've played a lot of fighting games where I'm new and I'm
Something
like, just
that
who's the
just-
grappler in this?
I just want to bring up that Strive is doing that now. And
That's
you guys,
my
yeah,
like
Stripe.
that's been my thing when I try to introduce somebody to whatever goofy fighter that I'm playing around now. I always have to go to the character select screen and be like, they're this, they're this, they're this, they're this, they're this. And yeah, Fantasy Strike and now Strive are the only things that kind of buck that trend.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that Guilty Gear is catching up to us.
in that regard, yeah,
I actually was gonna put it that way.
we have, we got some
I like
things
it.
on deck, right? But
Well, I mean, it's bombing on them, but honestly, it's fair. I literally am glad they're catching up to us, because that's what other fighting games should do too.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I'm glad they're catching up with netcode. You know, supposedly.
yeah, we don't know.
we
yet.
haven't-
we're not going
we
to
haven't
find out
seen
this
that.
weekend, but
We have-
at
right.
some point,
To be
right?
determined.
That's right. We are not going to find out because they're not even going to potentially put that in until later. But I'm glad that it's moved the needle and they're thinking about it. But to go back to your question, like about making things easier to understand is the way I think of it all. So, okay, so we have a tutorial. Harada doesn't want a tutorial, but we have a tutorial, and it's like intentionally as short as we could make it.
Yeah, it's pretty short.
Like I think there is a value in going the other way and it like as exhaustive as you could possibly make it, which is what Virtua Fighter 4 did, and it was amazing, best tutorial in the world.
That is my favorite tutorial of all time.
So yeah, no, I agree. It is. I think it's the best tutorial of all time too. So that's a valid way to go. But we wanted to go the opposite way and be like, look, we just want to point you in the right direction and get you out of this as quickly as possible so you can start playing for real. And I felt like there were a lot of things that we could communicate better in the video form. So like if I need
Fantasy Strike character videos.
Yeah, if I need to tell you something like, okay, so this move, if you hit them, a certain thing will happen. But if you counter hit, like if you hit them out of a move, like another thing will happen. And like here, so if you counter hit, you can do this combo. If that's the information I need to convey to you, I can convey it like super fast in a video, whereas it would be kind of cumbersome. Like you can do it in a playable thing, but it just takes longer and there's more steps, and like you're gonna make the character in counter hit state and hope that they hit him correctly, but then how do they know to do the combo? Like there's just some things that lend themselves better to a video. So I've just latched onto that, and I made narrated a video for every character, and we put that in the game itself in like a Netflix interface that looks really cool. It could have been just
it's in the learn tab, everybody.
Could have been just like a programmer, just list of character names. But I was like, why don't we make this the most awesome looking thing we can to help you along? But then the next whole phase of things, I think, is part of this. the whole underlying concept is like, how do you help the player understand? They're new, they don't get it. They're like, what is this crazy fighting game world? How can we help you understand what's going on? We just try to make everything as readable as possible. Like, number of hit points are discrete chunks, so you can tell exactly how much damage everything does. The super meter auto refills over time, so you know exactly how it works the first second you see it working. When a character is invulnerable, they flash white. When a character is counter hit, they flash red. When they're poisoned, they're purple. When they're able to parry something, they're green. When they have armor on them, they are blue.
Blue, yeah.
So that's to make it readable. Like, you see one blue thing and then you learn what blue is. You see a white thing, you learn what white is. Other things okay, that's like kind of minor, but that's like not common, really.
It isn't actually. But as a matter of fact, like that's one of those things that you don't see, but you see it a lot in like any other game, like any action game. When you play it, like any single one is gonna say, if this character's red, they're gonna do a specific action. All of them. Even Doom does this, where it's like, oh, the character's flashing, you can do glory kill. Boom, that's it. You figure it out.
You're right. I mean, other genres are ahead of. So this is where, like, on the one hand, on this, lighting up characters of certain colors, we're kind of ahead of the curve of most of the fighting game genre, but we're catching up to the other genres.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then there's something we did that literally no other fighting game has with this readability thing, and that's the frame advantage visual effects.
I like that. I've heard people say they don't like it, but I like it personally. Like,
really? I've overwhelming positive feedback on that. I haven't even heard it.
I think some people have asked me, and just in regards to like, I think the one time I ever heard someone say something negative about it was just in regards to like, you already know what situation you're in by the time you're there necessarily. But like, if you press the gray, 2-hit charge, and you blocked it, and they blocked it, like you're done anyway. That's not like.
Okay, so that's not a good argument. I can explain why. I mean, so okay, so I thought maybe you were going to say it's too distracting, but
I don't think it's distracting.
Yeah, so no one has really made that argument, and we spent so much time on that during the implementation of it, is to put in something that, if anything, you would not notice. Actually, like, it's okay. It's
very much like part of.
If you play the game and don't know it's there, that's fine. Like, because we don't want to annoy you. Is what I'm getting at. So I think we succeeded on that, which means that if there's any value, then it's a positive. So like, the reason I think that was a bad argument that person was making is that if you can find a case where it's not helpful, that doesn't matter. You need to find a case where it is helpful. So is it ever helpful? Absolutely. Yeah, there are many, many cases where it is helpful. Like, I played Lum is like my favorite character. I think he's the panda, the gambling panda.
Panda boy.
Yeah, I played him, 2 years or something before we put in those frame advantage effects. And I'm embarrassed. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I didn't realize that his sweep was plus until we had those. Again, that is super embarrassing.
Wait a minute.
I shouldn't have told you that, but
you did.
Anyway, I was like, that felt like proof of how good it was. It was like, oh man, if I didn't realize that, like, think of how many things other people don't realize. So part of it is like, to realize the baked in things going on, like, it's just always plus. Okay, so if you do it once, you realize, oh, every time I do this in the future, it's going to be plus. But there's other things that are not baked in. Like, if you do you can do a move like a dive kick, like too high, and it'll be minus, or too low, not too low. Low is good. Low, and it'll be really plus. But like, where's the threshold? You could, a certain move is going to have a different result every time you do it based on how meaty it was and how high up it was. And you can see like, oh, this is how I do it correctly. So it's actually really useful to train yourself, trying to get those the blue pluses when you can.
Well, I think it's really good it's also useful because you can kind of learn on the fly. That's one of those things that you play a game.
Yeah,
and you're like,
I'm
you play a
I'm a big
game
fan of-
and you're like, oh god, I don't even know what went wrong there, and you're like, oh well, you know what? Maybe throwing that out in a
Yeah.
neutral situation is very risky compared to this other move, right? You just weigh the positives and the negatives as you see them. But I do want to flip the question,
Okay.
because Fantasy Strike ahead of the curve in a lot of things. A lot of games are catching up to it, but you like fighting games in general, of course.
Right.
Out of
Yeah.
everything that's come out recently, is there anything out there that really caught your eye? Is there anything that you're like, that's really smart? I've never seen something done like that. This is useful for that reason. And I ask because like it's interesting to know where people come from, and it's also interesting to know like what people are playing and what influences they have. Like when I asked Shady K a while back what games he liked, he said Million Arthur, and I was like, that's the last answer you were ever gonna get. I was ever expecting out of you. Like this guy who works on tag games is known for tag. Oh, he really likes Million Arthur, by the way. And I'm like, all right, well that's interesting. What games are really really impressing you lately?
I've played less and fewer and fewer fighting games lately. I plan to. So it's unfortunate timing for us because like we're on the cusp of this Guilty Gear, and I really wish I could tell you like really love the new Guilty Gear or really hate the new Guilty Gear or something, but I can't tell you anything because we haven't played it.
Right.
But Guilty Gear was just always huge for me ever since I played it a little bit during Guilty Gear X, and then when Guilty Gear XX came out, from then on I was just completely into it. I was really impressed with Xrd. I mean, okay, obviously the graphics are amazing, and we base some of our shader effects on the tech that they're using. But we're talking about gameplay. I was really impressed that they got rid of FRCs. I didn't think they would ever do that in a million years. I mean, I'm a good player. I can mostly do them. I got 9th at Evo in Guilty Gear like one year. Like I can play the game, so it's not about me. But I just didn't think
it's more about like somebody in my position. I cannot do FRCs consistently, so that was just a whole world of like character, like things that a character can do that I just did not really have access to. At least not consistently.
I feel you, and I played players that try to play. I try to play the game and teach them, and they had the same struggles. So it was a bold, unexpected move to me that they're like, okay, that's all gone. It's now YRC, and instead of like 4 frames, maybe just the whole startup. Just if you haven't hit them yet, just anywhere in there, press a button and you'll get it. Also, when you hit somebody, okay, like if you hit with an attack and then you Roman cancel it, and then you do your next attack. That process is not something I ever had any trouble with. It's fine. You do a button, cancel, and another button. But I got to admit, it's super fast. So if you're new, it's hard. So they took a thing where I wasn't missing it. I mean, it was fine for me. But then they let kind of everybody do it by adding a slowdown effect. That also surprised me. I was like, oh, that's a level of caring about the player that like it didn't realize they were that, had that much empathy.
Right. They actually care. Like,
yeah. So I feel like I've learned a lot from Guilty Gear over the years. Another series, Soul Calibur. Now I played an incredible amount of every single Soul Calibur except 6, but the reason is just 6 came out when I was busy and I just didn't get around to it.
Yeah.
So I don't have any. I don't have it a slam on it. I just don't have anything to say about 6. But in general, I was really impressed with the series. I found it to be one of the very easiest to teach new players.
I agree with that. As a matter of fact, it's pretty straightforward. 8-way run is awesome.
8-way run
decision making straightforward.
Just one of the greatest things of the genre. It's so intuitive. It's like, it feels like, yeah, that's how these 3D games should have always been. And when you talk to new players, you show them the character, and you're like, okay, so you can basically press all the buttons and get different moves, or you can tap like any direction and get a different move, or you can hold any direction and you'll 8-way run and you'll get even a different move. And there you go. Now that doesn't give you 100% of the moves, but it gives you so many moves that you can play for real,
Mhm.
like pretty real.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I got a lot positive to say about the series. I really like it. Street Fighter 2 series I really like. I guess another one that caught my eye is Samurai Showdown. Although I have some more negative things on that. Like, okay, Samurai Showdown works in a different way than almost any other fighting game,
Yes.
and that's interesting. Like, it feels like the kind of thing where just somebody who didn't know how fighting games work made it, and so we get this. That's not a
fair,
knock.
right?
I just
Yeah.
mean. Somebody who just like wasn't on board with all the tropes or something, and what if it's just totally different? What if
What if we
you
just
know, when you
throw everything out the window and now you can
Yeah,
lose 50% of your health? And
every blocked move has like a weird clang on it, but you can cancel that
cancel.
and just right.
Yeah,
It was like, whoa, what's going on now? It's weird, and I feel like it kind of works. Like,
Oh,
like,
it works.
like
I think it
it's
works.
like
I'm a big. I love the old Sam shows. I love them. So I'm really like on that camp.
So yeah, I missed the whole boat. Like, I didn't know really much about Samurai Showdown until the latest 3D one. I've lived in arcades forever, right? And it was always around, but in every scene I was in, it was always kind of looked down on, and no one took it seriously. So I just wasn't aware of how it worked, but I took it more seriously with the 3D one. So I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, this is weird. This is interesting. This should be a thing. What I really don't like is every possible thing about the user interface.
That's
Just
fair.
total
Totally fair.
garbage. Like, I mean, I'm in a weird lobby with 20 squares. When I try to play somebody, got to move my guy from one square to another. What's going on? Like, I got to go to it, back to it every time. Like, there's so many. It's such a disaster. Everything about the UI makes it a pain.
In your
But also
opinion, I want to ask about the UI right there. Is it like, how do you think these things happen? Because some of these games come out with these just disastrous UIs, right? Like you mentioned, and it just seems like it's so hard. Why is it so hard for a major company to come out and just, make a decent user interface for online play? It's
my
always
lord.
something. It's Battle Lounge. It's whatever you want to call it. There's always just some weird decision being made where you have this weird lobby system that is kind of opaque, doesn't make a lot of sense. Why is that? What do you think? Like, why is it so hard?
Yeah, I feel like I do have a little bit of insight to answer that.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you.
So, I think the full answer to that kind of hit me when we were making Fantasy Strike. Really, like, I would have struggled to answer it a little bit more than when I've lived through it.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's a example that will illustrate it. So I also worked on Street Fighter HD Remix.
Yes.
And I was the lead designer of it. And after it shipped, there was a fan of the game. He liked the game a lot. So he's not like a hater. He's not, he's not out to get me. He's like, hey, we really like the game, but the matchmaking is just terrible. And I was like, well, I mean, the matchmaking, it just finds who has the right ping and who's in the skill level. Like, no, it isn't. Like, what are you talking about? And he said, yeah, well, sure, it does that, but you have to sit in the lobby and wait, and you can't go to the other modes while you're waiting. Okay, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And that I was just so like caught off guard by that, because I thought, well, sure, it would be better if you could do that, but that's not really, like, first of all, it's not matchmaking. But second, you can't come at me. You can't come complain to me about that. I mean, that wasn't my job. Okay.
Right.
But then his point was like, well, it isn't literally matchmaking because there's like an algorithm that does that, but it affects the matchmaking because it means that there's not as many people online as and the part about, like, it's not my job, like, he doesn't know, what, why isn't it my job or something? Like, he doesn't know that there's some user interface designer that so there's all like a team has just all these different people, everything's compartmentalized and so on. And then on Fantasy Strike, it was like the opposite of that. Is super holistic. Like every decision that I made about all that stuff was from a very holistic point of view. It's not about like what shade of green is the button going to be because I'm the UI designer. It's also the UX. It's also what modes should there even be? Like so how do you get into the queue? How do you go from main menu to playing as quickly as possible? But that's holistic in that it's part of that consideration is should we have lobbies?
Right.
Like everything is connected is what I'm getting at. If you really do this correctly, like when you're thinking of all the clicks to go from A to B, it's not just about user interface. It's this very zoomed out like designer. You want Steve Jobs on your team here or something. You're like a big visionary thinker that's putting all sorts of things together. Not just what is this screen going to look like. Do
you think that that's necessary for these kinds of fighting games to be produced?
Yes. Okay, yes, I do. So I think that the way you get a lobby screen not like a match find screen where you can't leave that screen because you have to sit around and wait until you get a match. I think the way you get that is you have a team that's so compartmentalized that it's somebody's job to make that screen. And so someone hands them this task, make that screen. But they're not holistically thinking. They're not thinking about the entire product, the entire experience, about like, no, it's very important that you need to be able to go between each mode. And that affects everything. Like it is a major programming task. We spent a ton of time and money to make you be able to go from any of our modes to an online game directly when the match is found, and then put back into the mode you were where you left off. That's a technical challenge, and it's not trivial. So as a UI designer, you can't even make that call. That's going to affect the whole schedule and budget, and producers have to be involved, but they need to be. You see what I mean? Everything needs to be.
That's interesting. That makes a lot of sense, actually, now that you mention that, because we're talking about like, why doesn't this big company throw all this money at it? It's because there's so many teams involved, I suppose, right? If you really think about it, like, why does Bandai Namco have such a hard time making online experiences? Because they have a million people working on it. Now that you mention it, right? Like, that's
So I think those a huge company, they could and should do it better than me, not the other way around. But I think they don't get that they need that approach. Like they all seem to. Every time I see this terrible online stuff, it really just reinforces this theory I'm saying, because it always feels like, oh, this screen is like that because somebody's job was only this and they didn't think about anything else. So I mean, keep that in mind the next time you're frustrated, and see if it rings true for you, that that it feels like just nobody thought through the whole project from the top down on the user experience.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, I love talking about the theory, but there's this whole issue. Like, the game can be fun, it can be super turbo fun, right? But people have to get there first. You have to get them in the game, right? And then they have to play the game at that level. So there's so many steps before that we have to get through, right? And that's super interesting, because we're talking about online play. How do we make the game accessible for online play? And first of all, the game has to have a user experience that guides them towards the online play. Like, if I have to sit there watching the screen just matchmaking, I'm probably not going to sit in matchmaking and play. I'm probably just going to go do something else because I don't want to wait. But if I get given alternatives where I can wait, I can do other things while I'm waiting, then it's great. And that's become a thing now, thankfully. That's actually a thing. Even these Bandai Namco games that I'm ripping on, they actually have that now, except for Tekken. I don't know why. Well, Tekken's like Tekken's a very old engine, so that's probably why. You want to be able to play other stuff. You want to be able to go from the main menu to playing online as quickly as possible. So when I was designing that flow for Fantasy Strike, the flow is main menu. You click once to do online play. You click a second time to choose which mode, like so let's say you choose casual. A third time to pick your character, and that's it. Now you're in the queue. I'm actually curious about something, because I think this is something I've thought before. Did you guys take inspiration from Overwatch for the UI? It looks like it. That's why I'm asking. Sorry, you broke up. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear it. The question is, the UI that you guys designed, is it supposed to be inspired by like Overwatch? Because it looks really similar. And this is maybe just like a question that I have that doesn't have any substance, but it looks really close. Is that like a thing?
Yeah, it is similar. Let me finish my thought and then I'll answer that.
Go ahead.
So I was saying it took like 3 clicks or something to go from main menu to, to play. And I was like, can we get it lower? How can we get even fewer clicks?
Like, yeah. There's no start screen.
So yeah, well, I mean, I thought about that. But anyway, the idea is like, well, what if you could get in the queue without even picking your character? Because you picked your character last time, right? So can we have a button that you don't even go to? You don't even go to the character select. So like you click once for online play, and then it says, "What do you want? Casual or ranked?" And underneath the casual and ranked choices are buttons for immediately enter this queue without even going into the character select with the last character. So you can click once to go to online play, click once to enter the queue with your casual character, click once to enter the queue with your last ranked team that you played. And that's it. So while I was designing that, I was comparing it to other games, and the one that really stood out was Guilty Gear. And I started at main menu, and I just wanted to play anybody online, and it was 11 clicks, literally 11, because it involves stuff like what region are you in the world? What sub-region? What sub-region?
Oh, my Lord. For the online, I'm not gonna lie to you.
It was great, and I'm not exaggerating. It was 11. They actually changed it later, and it became fewer than 11. It became like, I don't know, 7 or something. But come on, man, what's going on? All right, so
I just want to play the game.
So you ask about Overwatch. Yeah, I'll tell you why it is kind of similar to Overwatch. The story of this whole thing, as I'm sure you're getting from me, is me playing other games and being just totally upset and irate over how terrible a lot of their UI or UX decisions are.
Yeah.
So the one here is I was designing like, how is the menu going to work? What button, like you need a button to see like what your character's moves are. You need another button to see like, I don't know, are we going to have costumes maybe? How do you change your costume? I don't know. We just need like a screen with several buttons. Okay.
Right.
And I was thinking, okay, should they be small? Should they be big? Like, can I put one in the corner and one in the bottom? Oh, do they have to be next to each other? Just like standard UI things. And I thought, okay, I should just look at other games because they know what they're doing, right? And I looked at Street Fighter, and the question was, when you have a controller, there's certain kinds of like button arrangements that make more sense. And when you have a mouse, it's totally different. Like you can have you can have a screen with buttons kind of anywhere, and you can mouse click on them. But with a controller, you get like lost. Like, wait, what zone am I in?
Yeah,
you want to put them
like
your
cursor at that moment, right?
Yeah, right. It's a lot different, and there's more different than just that. But you get the idea that you might want to do it totally differently if you had a mouse interface than if you had a controller interface. And so I thought, okay, I'm kind of having a hard time with this. What does Street Fighter do? Oh, do you know what they do? They have no mouse input at all.
Yeah, they don't. It doesn't.
I was shocked.
You work with it.
I'm scandalized. I was like, it's like 2018 or whatever, and they have no mouse interface. Like, are you on a Steam game? Are you kidding me? I could not believe it. And then I played several other fighting games on Steam, and they didn't either. And I was dying. I was like, I can't believe this is allowed. So, I just abandoned fighting games for my research on this stuff. I was like, okay, I need another genre, man. Like who out there knows how to make a UI that works for mouse and for controller? And so the first game that happened to come to my mind was Diablo 3. Diablo 3 was made for a mouse. It has the DNA of a game that's made for the mouse. But then they ported it to console. I don't know if you know much about Diablo. That's a whole.
In here, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, as a side note, I don't know of any game ever in the history of games that is so extreme as to be so negatively reviewed as Diablo 3 when it came out, and to be so positively reviewed when its console version came out.
The Ultimate Evil Edition,
yeah. So, and I'm on board with it. I think it was
great.
They did a fantastic job of it's not just the console port, it's all the changes to the game plus the console port. But the console port was like crazy good. Like I felt at the time it came out, I played both of them side by side and was like, I actually prefer the console one, like, which I did not.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier to play. Oh yeah.
Okay, but let's set the gameplay aside because right now it's about the menus. That's what my research. So it's like, how do they do the menus? So I looked at what they did and I'm like, okay, I get it. I see what they're doing, but I can learn something from these two versions, but they're pretty different. And also, I don't think they would have made the choices they made if on day one they knew that it was going to be a console version. That's not what happened. They made a PC game, and later on they're like, what the heck do we do? And they changed a bunch of things. But if they had known from day one it had to be both, maybe they would have cleverly decided things that work on both. So I was like, this Overwatch game is coming out. It was not out. It was just
it was coming out at the time. Yeah,
it was just talked about, and I was like, oh man, I gotta find I gotta get into beta of this thing to play the UI.
I gotta click stuff in this game.
The UI.
I had zero interest. I don't want to play a shooter. I didn't care about it. Man, I gotta see. So I got into the beta to look at the UI, and I also played the game, and I was like, actually, this game is great, and I really liked it. I didn't expect to really like it, but I got way into it, and I like Overwatch. But anyway, I saw the UI, and then finally saw it took longer to see the console, UI, but I finally got that too, and I got it. I was like, yeah, they are so clever. They know what they're doing.
Blizzard, man.
Yeah, man, they like
yeah, those Blizzard guys.
Like, like the kind of the essence was that the thing that it was the light bulb for me was like, okay, there is no perfect answer. There is no way to do it exactly right for both, but there's ways to make it like 90% right. So like 90% of it can be exactly the same. And then the last 10%, the mouse works slightly different. The mouse version has a different kind of button. Like it has you click and it doesn't lock in the character. You click and it just selects them, and there's a different way to lock in.
Yeah, there's a lock in.
And so not just that, but you get the idea. Like the last 10%, it works different. So I borrowed from that, but also just I felt like they were on the right track with let's have the menu show off characters. Let's have like just a big character right in your face on the main menu. So yeah, Fantasy Strike does that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was definitely influenced by them.
I think it.
I hope people don't
really
knock us
sells
for that.
the game.
Like,
no, I don't think so.
No,
and I was gonna say specifically in praise of the game, it's. I gotta say, I would never want to show anyone Street Fighter V going in blind. They're like, because it's like 10 buttons, and I'm like, wait, what do I do?
Yeah.
And it's really weird. I still think it's weird to this day. I'm like, why did they choose this? Why does it look like that? And sometimes I'm just sitting there like, how do I add people on CFN again? What was it? What was the movie?
Less is more, man. Less is more.
Yeah.
Oh man, adding people on CFN. I urge you to look up Sirlin.net, my website, where I have a post of me trying to add a friend on Street Fighter V. That's
really okay. I'm gonna have to look at that because I've seen your your fighting game philosophy page with like based on like everything from Street Fighter 4. I love that, and I think it's great. But I've never seen that, so I'm gonna have to look at it.
Yeah, search for adding a friend in Street Fighter 5 Sirlin on Google or something, and it's my chat log of explaining, hey, I'm trying to add a friend, and it's so long and so complicated.
I've never heard of this. I gotta check that out.
There's all these twists and turns, and I'm like, it's a chat log where I'm asking people like, okay, on the screen I see button X, Y, and Z. Which one should I push? And like they're all wrong all the time. Nobody knows what button I should push. And the whole point of it was to add someone that I could play through the friend list because I wanted to see like if theirs worked as well as what I was planning. And the ultimate end, not to ruin it, but the ultimate end of that story is that you actually can't. You can't challenge someone on your friends list to a game.
Yeah, you have to go to Battle Lounge and like.
I gotta go to the lounge, set it up
So
with one person, and
I did all of that to be able to challenge them, and I couldn't even do it.
Feels bad.
That feels really bad. No, but that's just the thing. Because I mean, like you'll say, and I think it is imperative that we make games accessible in fighting games. But honestly, I don't think it matters that much. I think people will play any game if it's accessible and their friends are playing it and it's popular, right? Because people play these absurdly intensive shooters and MOBAs and everything all the time. So I would put that to the side, and I would say, you know what? It's not even that. Is the user interface good? How does the community grow around the game? What is there in place so that you can grow the community? As a tournament organizer, what do you get out of the game, right? These are questions that have to be answered, and I think, people kind of make these decisions very early on, right? When the game comes out with no lobbies, they're like, oh, I'm not going to host a tournament for that. There's no lobbies, or there's no spectating, so I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to tell my friends to go play the game. Let's not play that. All right, we're going to go find some other game that has this. And, you play the game, it's like, oh, this game has delay-based online, so I can't play this with my friend, on the other side of the coast. Let's not play that game. We're not going to play that game. Let's not do that. It's right there. You don't even know what the game's about. Like, it's not even like, do you know how the game plays? Do you like the character? No, hell no. You don't even get there. So, in my analysis of these things in regards to online play, I don't even look at the game. I'm like, the game could be anything you want. It could be Dive Kick, it could be Street Fighter 5, anything. How do you introduce people to the game, right? Because I think that's almost paramount. I think people will play almost anything if it's easy. If there's a lot of thought put into the user interface, if the online is sufficient, because I think online nowadays is really important to selling your game at all. That's something that I've been told twice now by other developers. I'm like, yeah, we had to do it, otherwise they were not going to let us sell this game. I was like, wow, okay, that's something I didn't expect. But I will say,
I have a pretty sad, cynical view of all that, because I feel like if the question is what is the right way to implement a lot of this stuff, we've pretty much got it. Like, we as any, not just me, like anybody working on these kind of games would tell you, well, it's better to have rollback than not. It's better to have, the ability to play any mode while you're waiting than not, like, and so on. I mean, there would maybe be disagreement on the lock thing, but I think I'm on pretty solid footing there. But for the most part, like, yeah, we kind of get how to do these things right. But the thing to be really sad about is, does that translate to sales? And if it doesn't, then think about that incentive system. It seems like it seems like it doesn't. It seems like really what's going on is players will complain about Street Fighter 5 endlessly. How come its netcode isn't good? How come I can't challenge a friend? How come I can't do more while I'm waiting for the queue? Why is it so hard to get in the queue? Just all, why are all these things bad about it? But then are they paying money to the people doing it right? Like, in general, I don't see that. I see like a lot of complaining that the big name games aren't good enough and not enough support. I don't just mean Fantasy Strike. I mean, this is just like, it's not about this comment here is more about like kind of mainstream versus indie.
Yeah.
Where what the real solution to those complaints would be is to vote with your dollars, to make sure there's more voices out there, to make sure that Mike Z is making whatever he wants to make, and so on. That is not just Capcom and Namco. When you put all your money on like 2 or 3 companies and then complain about them, but we're not growing up challengers, then you're not going to get real change. You get change by supporting challengers.
Yeah. Right. I don't think people realize how deep like their own brand loyalties go.
Yes.
Because they'll sit there, they'll complain. Yeah.
I'm with you.
Complain about Street Fighter 5 all they want, but the moment SF6 is a thing, they're going to have pre-orders.
Yeah, the pre-orders there, day one.
Yeah. Honestly, like, they'll complain about Street Fighter 5 all day and they'll be like, yo, what do you want to play then? You want to try something? Nah, I'm gonna go pick this Ibuki and queue up, man.
That's what I'm gonna do. That's what I like to do. No, but
man. It's fanboyism.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think that also means a lot in the FGC too, like as a whole. Like when people started having this discussion about online tournaments, and people were like, "Oh, my game that I play is not good for this, so I'm against it." Like, that's what I'm end up seeing. I see like only those MK guys get to have this. I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's something else, but I hope to see more indie developers, like yourself, games like Fantasy Strike and everything. Really, because I appreciate that effort. I will be the first to admit I have not purchased Fantasy Strike yet, but it has been sitting on my Switch my wish list for I don't know how long now.
On God, we're gifting you Fantasy Strike.
No,
We're gonna have to,
like
do something about this.
I'm gonna buy. I want to buy it because I want to support these indie devs. Absolutely, because you guys are doing great things by having the technical accessibility there, having the rollback net code, and caring about your community enough to make sure that your game is crossplay. That right there, I
pushing
think
the envelope, man.
Yeah,
pushing the envelope.
That speaks volumes, and that's
we're actually the first crossplay of any traditional fighting game. Brawlhalla was first. Technically they're a different type of fighting game, but we were the first before that. And you can probably dig up some tweet of mine once about Mortal Kombat where, like, I don't know. I'm trying to be nice here. Like, it sounds like I'm just totally hating on them. I just don't know how else to say it. But literally, why are they so behind? Like, they announced a crossplay thing and it got a ton of press, and the amount of crossplay they were announcing fell far short of what we launched with many months earlier. And I was like,
you know what the issue with that is?
What is going on here?
You know what's really weird? And I mean, as somebody who has, I play MK on the PC version because that's the one I have. I'm not gonna play a Nintendo Switch version. I have the Nintendo, but I bought it for PC. And so there's like a whole different porting team, is what it is. Like, they got the people who did the MK exports, so that that every time, every time that an MK11 patch comes out, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna wait a week before this comes out on PC.
Yeah,
and that's what happens every single time. And I'm like,
Lord,
that's the best it's been now, because like, I had to deal with it with 9, I had to deal with it with 10, I had to deal with it in Justice.
That only answers half of it though, because that is, I'm glad you pointed that out. But another factor was that it wasn't crossplay for all the match types, like only certain.
Yeah, it's only like casual ? Something like that. It's like one type, which doesn't make sense to me, but
Yeah, that so if you said, oh well, a whole other team made this other version, and so we're having that. But it's like, even within the version that has crossplay, it doesn't have like enough crossplay, and I don't know why I don't know what the hang up is, or
it's
WB Games, man.
It's another thing where it's just so important. Like, okay, maybe it's not important in how people make their purchasing decisions, but it's obviously the right thing to try to do as the developer.
It matters for me a ton. I don't know.
Because I mean, for me, like, I stay at home all the time. Even quarantine aside, I stay at home a lot with my kids, and after they go to bed, I want to. If I want to play a fighting game, I am, basically born and bred on Nintendo hardware. So games that are crossplay that I can play with Shib on while he has PC. I can play with Diz, who plays some games on the Xbox. The fact that we can all play that together, we have that unified community, like that influences my personal purchasing decision a whole lot. And anytime that I find a game with crossplay and good netcode, like anytime I see anybody, I'm like, look, get on this, please.
Yeah, it just has to be standardized, really. I mean, it's 2020, right? I mean, what are we waiting for, really? Luckily for you guys have been able to get that going, and it's just really a matter of you guys setting the table for everybody else to catch up to you now, because you have the power to go ahead and make these decisions without having to run it through somebody else, like in corporate or whatever it is, right? So you have the authority to go ahead and make these changes and really, like I said, set a precedent, right? And these guys just need to catch up. I mean, it's really time. This crossplay stuff, it definitely has to be available, man. Especially with the new generation coming, they just got to make it a standard, really, for most of these games. And that's just what I think. I mean, we live in a unified world, right, where everybody has access to everything at any point in time, right? So why not with these games?
Communities do not need to really be split anymore for
please don't,
like, any reason. Like, it's at this point, like, we all know each other well enough. We all can control the game pretty much the same way. Like, all it does is mess up the ability for people to play stuff with each other, and impacts what purchases you can make, so on and so forth. It's just rough when you see like some sleep game and like you cannot play it with people because they have it on PlayStation. I can't.
Yeah, it feels so totalitarian, man. It has to end.
Yeah,
I
well, a
will.
lot
I
of it
do
was,
want to.
was Sony.
Yeah, a lot of this was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You brought that up, right? That specifically PlayStation had a hard time with that.
Yeah.
And you guys
Yeah.
launched. You guys staggered your launch of Sony's crossplay with PlayStation for Fantasy Strike, and Battle for the Grid did the same thing. There's a ton of caveats where it is available in other games, like even games like Modern Warfare, Call of Duty, have like restrictions for PlayStation players can only play this. Like they have this content before the rest of you because that's the kind of contract we had to make. I don't know. Now, I think we've covered a lot in regards to fighting games online and how we can make them more accessible. How the process doesn't even begin. You mentioned clicks. It doesn't even begin when you play the game. It's just when you click on something, when you press a button for the first time. There's a process that has to be taken. There's a certain amount of steps that you have to really be aware of, and that's actually, that's a big takeaway for me that you mentioned that when you have a situation where the game feels clunky, just think about the fact that there's not a unified team in making this vision, right? There's just a ton of people. There's a ton of teams. There's a ton of processes that you have to go through that don't allow everything to mesh, right? To mesh together. And these game designers in the fighting genre, I suppose, because every other genre kind of is figuring this out. They have the situation where it's like, yeah, we need to make sure everything connects. But then you have a battle planner, and then you have a artist team, and you have a user experience designer, and all these people don't communicate with each other. So when it gets programmed together, there's no direction, right? There's no flow. So I think that's a really interesting perspective on it. So and I do want to mention. I don't know if you know this. A little while back, do you know about the GGPO plus R project that was recently kind of put on Twitter?
GGPO plus R?
Yeah,
No,
have you heard of that?
what is?
Okay.
I mean, I know all about GGPO, obviously, but what's the
Yeah, of
plus
course.
R?
So what ended up happening is that they made a caster for Accent Core, right? Where you can play the game kind of like Melty Blood, like a rollback caster for Accent Core, kind of like Melty Blood's Community Edition. They were pretty decently along. The game had save states back, like they were able to load and unload the game. And then Mike Z got involved. And this is kind of news, I guess, for the viewers as well. Mike Z came in. He said, actually, I've been talking to Arc System Works about this, and they want to do this for the whole game. So do you guys want to help us do it? And apparently, now the people who are doing GGPO plus R, they're interested in integrating the game's their caster into the actual game. So we might actually get a rollback version of Accent Core in the future.
Great. That's awesome.
So yeah, I highly recommend anyone who's not heard about this yet. GGPO plus R. It's on Twitter. They have a Twitter account now, and you can see like a demo video where they actually have the game running. And they posted some news about how like Mike Z was in their Discord server talking to them about how like, well, actually Lab Zero has been doing this for a little while. Where they're like, we'd really like to put a rollback into this game because we love Guilty Gear. And then they said, okay, well, we need people to help us in the community since you guys are doing the caster. So who knows, right? Maybe a year from now we'll be playing Accent Core with rollback. That'd be wonderful. We're kind of running really had a schedule talking about this. I've loved having the conversation. So then I don't know if you have any closing thoughts, anything you really want to say to the people watching.
Well, just to give a quick news of what I'm up to since I've just sort of announced something on my Patreon right now. I'm developing some new tabletop games. So I'm also a tabletop game designer. Many years ago, I released a game called Puzzle Strike and another one called Yomi. Yomi is a fighting card game. And now, years and years later, I have two completely new games. They're not new editions of those games. They are new, different games that are inspired by those games. So a new Puzzle Strike-ish game and a new Yomi-ish game that my patrons are testing and playing right now at patreon.com/Sirlin. So, join that and you can see how those games develop, but also you can see what's new in Fantasy Strike. We have a really big kind of surprising patch that's in the works that our patrons can play. Don't know exactly what's going to be public. A month from now, maybe. So something around that. Yeah. It'll be news. It'll be something. It's not just a regular patch. So I hope you'll cover that.
Yeah, I'm
For
actually
sure.
interested.
Yeah.
You think if we get a build of that and through your Patreon, you think we can play it here on the stream, or is that hush hush?
No, you cannot play that on the stream,
All right,
unfortunately.
I'm
It's top secret,
Fair
man.
ass.
top secret. Fair enough.
You know what, man? The answer is always no unless you ask.
It's true.
You
I
really can't, because we've got kind of one shot to make this news, and it's got to be, blasted to the biggest sources we
All right,
can.
good.
All
Oh,
at
absolutely.
once.
Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
we can have you be part of that on the day, so that the day it's public, you can take full advantage of it.
Yeah, I'd
You
love
talk to my.
Sure.
I don't know if you are familiar with Leon Tess.
Yes.
He's my community manager. Yeah, if you talk to him about it, he can hook you up with whatever it is he
Yeah,
can.
we will be back here with Fantasy Strike content. I'm gonna play the game anyway. I love Fantasy Strike. I'm gonna be here, on stream playing Rogue Yoshi or something, and he's gonna give me the work. But that's just how the game is. Anyway, yeah, super love having the
Hold on.
conversation. Dave, you had something to say?
Yeah, real quick. I do wanna vouch for the Patreon of the tabletop games. I'm actually a pretty big fan of your tabletop games. I've been
really?
like, yelling at people to play Yomi and Puzzle Strike for a good bit. And I remember like when it was like mad early in development. I had to get like a print and play and cut it out and like I was like trying to show it to people. It was like, yeah, no, the queen is just a dragon punch. I just land line of those and you win. So like I heavily implore people to go in on that, and I actually need to consider doing it. I need to consider getting it on Patreon myself at some point because of that.
Oh wow! So you go so far back that you were doing print and play Queens and Yomi, but you don't actually know what this new thing is, right?
No, I knew about it because I do follow your Twitter, but like I have not. I haven't.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
So you got an idea, but you haven't actually seen it. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it. Cool.
All right,
I
we're
put
gonna
out
have-
just some teaser picture, but it's quite a different thing when you actually play the new tabletop games.
I'm super interested, actually. We've been talking a little bit internally about playing tabletops, so that's going to be a thing. Then.
Yeah.
I guess we're just going to have to play Sirlin's tabletops. Why not, right? Let's do it.
Why not?
No, but yeah, I super appreciate it. It's been super insightful. It's been,
Yes.
everything I love personally. I'm actually super glad that I've been able to talk to so many people in game design here on the show, here on the stream. I think it's super insightful. I think it helps grow the communities that we're in, because this is one of those communities that has this insane amount of communication with their developers, right? Like even the studios with very little communication in fighting games have a lot more than any others, right? There's just zero communication for a lot of these games. So it's
Yeah. Now that you mention it's actually like unthinkable to me to do this in a bunch of other genres that just come to mind.
yeah, it is, and that's actually true of like that's something I'm always kind of surprised by it, because especially back when like we interviewed Shady K, I was like, can he really talk about all this stuff? And and he was super willing to talk about it. I'm like, wow, all right, this is interesting. This fighting game commentary stuff sure is interesting.
I played Shady K in Marvel 1 back in the day a bunch.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's like kind of exciting that he's doing what he's doing, and that you talk to him.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
shout out
I've-
Shady's a good guy.
Yeah, Shady's awesome. We all had him here. We were all talking to him a couple months ago, back for the community fight night for Battle for the Grid. But yeah, that's gonna be it for I guess this topic, Sirlin. I super appreciate you having on. I don't know if we're gonna have a tons of time to talk about everything else, because we got 30 minutes until Guilty Gear Strive. So I'm actually just we're gonna let it rock there. Let's just call it a night on this one. I super appreciate everybody for tuning in.
Yeah.
Stick right here. In 30 minutes, we're going to be live with the Guilty Gear Strive beta. So we're going to play a little bit of Exart. I'm going to be playing some sets with Diz until the game goes live. Once we know, we're going to raid the channel over at Gotta Be Legend, and we're going to check out the new game there in place. Hopefully, I don't know if the game has 2P versus. Hopefully it does. Once it does, we'll be playing some 2P versus over there. So yeah, be looking forward to that. Anyway, that's going to be it from the GBL podcast. Again, that was me, Shibarizu. You follow me here on Twitch. You can follow me on Twitter. It's Aliens down there in Twitter. Follow him. He's the main GBL channel, so twitch.tv/GottaBeLegend. Go follow him over there. Protodad's Dojo here on Twitch. Protodad plays over on Twitter. DIZ, you already know how to spell it. To everywhere, same thing on all socials. And Sirlin over at Sirlin Fantasy Strike, guys. Play Fantasy Strike. Play Puzzle Strike. Play Yomi. Play.
And check out his book too.
Yeah, playing to win. Can you tell me about your book? Can you shout out your book really quick for me, Sirlin?
Yeah, Playing to Win. You can check it out on sirlin.net/PTW. Actually, the entire book is free to read online there, but you can tip me or buy a physical one if you feel like it. And it's just about how to win tournaments, really, with the mindset that you need to actually get better at a competitive game.
All right, so if you want to up your game, you feel free to read it, and that's going to be it from us, guys. So that's the end of the podcast.